A father and son boarded a flight on Christmas Eve. 26 years later, a wall exposed the truth. Families hurried home with gifts tucked under their arms, while children ran around, their laughter echoing through the chilly air. In the middle of all this festive hustle, David, a devoted single father, was carefully maneuvering his old car through the crowded city streets. He glanced at the clock and realized that the airport was just 20 minutes away. In the backseat, his young son, Ethan, fidgeted with excitement, unable to contain his energy. Ethan's small face lit up with wonder as he looked out of the frosty window, eyes wide at the twinkling lights decorating the buildings and homes they passed. For David, this night was about more than just the flight. It was about giving his son a Christmas memory he would never forget. David had always been a thoughtful father. Even after the passing of his wife several years ago, he made it his mission to ensure that Ethan's life was filled with love, joy, and special moments. He had spent the past few weeks meticulously planning this Christmas trip. They were flying to visit David's parents, who lived in another city, and David wanted every detail to be perfect. He had packed Ethan's favorite toys, their clothes for the trip, and even a small surprise gift he planned to give him on the plane. The air in the car was filled with anticipation and the soft hum of holiday music playing from the radio. Ethan kept asking questions about the flight, the airplane, and what it would feel like to be high above the clouds. David patiently answered each one, smiling at his son's curiosity. Arriving at the airport, David parked the car and quickly gathered their luggage. The terminal was alive with the sights and sounds of the holiday season. Travelers hurried past, pulling wheeled suitcases behind them, while airport staff guided passengers with cheerful greetings. The smell of roasted chestnuts from a small vendor nearby mixed with the aroma of coffee from a cafe, creating a warm and comforting atmosphere. Ethan's eyes darted from one sight to another, taking in everything with the eagerness only a child could have. David checked in at the counter, their tickets in hand, and they made their way toward security. The line was long, but David kept Ethan close, explaining how security checks were important to keep everyone safe. Ethan held his father's hand tightly, a mixture of nerves and excitement evident on his face. Once through security, they finally reached their gate. The plane was visible through the large windows, its body gleaming under the terminal lights. David pointed it out to Ethan, who bounced on his toes in excitement. They had some time before boarding, so they found a small cafe near the gate. Ethan enjoyed a hot chocolate, his small hands wrapped around the warm cup, while David sipped his coffee and watched the people around him. There was something magical about airports on Christmas Eve, the mix of travelers going home, families reuniting, and the anticipation of journeys ahead. David felt a quiet joy in seeing his son so happy, knowing that moments like these were fleeting but precious. Boarding began, and David held Ethan's hand as they stepped onto the plane. The cabin smelled faintly of warm blankets and the soft scent of coffee from the service cart. They found their seats, and David carefully helped Ethan settle in by the window. The young boy pressed his nose to the glass, eyes wide as he watched the ground crew prepare the plane for departure. The excitement in the cabin was palpable. Passengers chatted with each other, families exchanged gifts, and flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisles, ensuring everyone was comfortable. David felt a familiar mix of responsibility and excitement. Flying with a child could be challenging, but tonight it felt special. He squeezed Ethan's hand and whispered, "We're going to have an amazing Christmas, buddy." Ethan beamed at him, nodding eagerly. As the plane taxied to the runway, David's mind wandered briefly. He thought about how far they had come, the hardships they had faced together, and the love that had kept them moving forward. The death of Ethan's mother had left a deep void, but David had never let it define their lives. He had thrown himself into being a good father, making sure Ethan always felt safe and cherished. Seeing Ethan's happiness tonight made every sacrifice worthwhile. The plane's engines roared to life, and soon they were lifting off the ground. Ethan pressed his face against the window, marveling at how tiny the cars and buildings looked below. The city lights shimmered like a sea of stars, and for a moment the world seemed infinite and magical. As they reached cruising altitude, the flight attendants began their usual routines. They served drinks and snacks, and Ethan eagerly accepted a small bag of cookies. David watched his son munch happily, occasionally laughing at Ethan's stories and observations about the clouds outside the window. The sky was clear, and the moonlight reflected off the snow-covered landscape below, creating a serene and almost otherworldly view. David felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that they were safe together and experiencing something beautiful. During the flight, David noticed something unusual. A section of the plane seemed slightly separated from the rest of the cabin. There was a subtle wall that divided the space, almost hidden from casual observation. He didn't think much of it at the time, assuming it was part of the plane's design. Ethan, unaware of his father's curiosity, was too busy enjoying his snacks and pointing out shapes in the clouds. For David, it was a fleeting thought, one that would linger faintly in his memory without making any immediate sense. The hours passed quickly. They chatted, laughed, and shared stories about past Christmases. Ethan pulled out a small notebook and began sketching the clouds they saw from the window, occasionally glancing at his father for approval. David encouraged him, proud of his son's imagination and curiosity. Around them, the cabin buzzed with the quiet excitement of travelers returning home or visiting loved ones. Flight attendants moved with gentle efficiency, smiling at children and offering assistance where needed. David felt a sense of connection not just to his son, but to the wider world around him. As the plane neared its destination, David began to feel a mix of excitement and relief. The flight had been smooth, and Ethan had been an absolute joy. They would soon be reunited with family, celebrating Christmas together, creating memories that would last a lifetime. Yet even in the midst of this ordinary holiday trip, there was an undercurrent of mystery, a hidden detail, unnoticed but present, that would only reveal itself many years later. David could not have imagined that this simple Christmas Eve flight would one day become a story he and Ethan would look back on with amazement and curiosity. Finally, the plane began its descent. Ethan pressed his face to the window again, marveling at how the city lights looked different from above. The ground grew closer, and David gently reminded his son to fasten his seatbelt. Their hearts beat in quiet anticipation as the plane touched down smoothly on the runway. The journey, filled with excitement, wonder, and the warmth of father-son bonding, was almost complete. As they disembarked, David carried a quiet sense of satisfaction, grateful for this shared experience and the joy it had brought his son. Little did they know, the seemingly ordinary flight held a secret, a detail that would remain hidden for decades. The memory of the unusual wall in the cabin, the quiet hum of the engines, and the magical Christmas Eve night would resurface years later, revealing a truth that neither David nor Ethan could have ever imagined. But for now, the father and son were simply happy, their hearts full of holiday cheer, unaware that their lives were part of a story far bigger than they realized. And so, the flight ended, and a new chapter in their lives began. Christmas joy, love, and shared memories filled the air, leaving both father and son with a sense of warmth that would stay with them for years to come. The ordinary night had been transformed into something extraordinary, even if they did not yet know just how extraordinary it truly was. After that memorable Christmas Eve flight, life for David and Ethan seemed to settle into a comfortable rhythm. They returned to their home, a modest but warm apartment that David had worked hard to make a place of safety and happiness for his son. The memories of that flight, the excitement of the plane, and the glow of city lights from above lingered in Ethan's mind. He would often talk about it, pointing out the clouds they had seen, the snacks he had enjoyed, and the thrill of flying for the very first time. David would smile, listening patiently, and answer his endless questions. He loved how curious and imaginative Ethan was, seeing his own love for exploration and discovery reflected in his young son. In the following weeks, David returned to his usual routine. He worked long hours at his office, ensuring that Ethan's life was filled with opportunities and stability. Evenings were spent helping with homework, preparing dinner, and sharing stories about family and history. Though life was busy, David always carved out time for Ethan. Every night they would sit together and talk about their day. Sometimes they would read stories, sometimes they would watch the snow fall outside their window, and sometimes they would simply sit in silence, enjoying each other's company. For David, these small, everyday moments were as important as the big adventures. Ethan, growing up, became increasingly curious about the world around him. He often asked questions about planes, airports, and the places they had visited. The memory of that Christmas Eve flight remained vivid in his mind, especially the part that had always puzzled him, a strange wall on the plane. He remembered looking out the window and seeing a section of the cabin that seemed slightly separated from the rest. At the time, he had asked his father about it, but David had only smiled and said it was part of the plane's design. Ethan accepted the answer, but a small seed of curiosity had been planted, one that would grow over the years. Life moved forward, and Ethan entered school, making friends, learning new subjects, and developing his own interests. David continued to guide him, teaching lessons about kindness, responsibility, and the importance of honesty. They shared many adventures together, trips to the park, visits to museums, and small weekend getaways. Each memory added layers to their relationship, strengthening the bond between father and son. Even though life was not always easy, David worked tirelessly to create a sense of normalcy and happiness. Ethan thrived under his father's care, excelling in school and displaying a keen sense of observation that often surprised those around him. Despite the busy routine of everyday life, the memory of that Christmas Eve flight never faded completely. Occasionally, David would find himself thinking about the plane, the unusual wall, and the passengers around them. He would recall how calm the flight attendants had seemed, how smooth the takeoff and landing had been, and how peaceful the sky had looked that night. At the time, none of these details had seemed particularly significant. But over the years, small fragments of memory would resurface in David's mind, like pieces of a puzzle he could not yet complete. Ethan, as he grew older, began to ask more questions about that trip. "Dad," he would say, "why did that plane have that wall?" "I remember seeing it, but we never talked about it." David would pause, searching for a simple answer. He knew it had been unusual, but at the time, he had not thought it worth worrying about. "Some planes are just built differently," he would explain. Maybe it was for privacy or for the crew, nothing to worry about. Ethan would nod, but his curiosity remained alive. Over time, he became more observant, noticing things that others overlooked. His inquisitive nature mirrored his father's, and David often found himself impressed by Ethan's sharp mind. As the years passed, David's work life became more demanding. He often had to travel for business, leaving Ethan with his grandparents or trusted friends. Even during these times, David made sure to stay connected, calling or video chatting whenever possible. The distance never weakened their bond. If anything, it strengthened it. Ethan grew into a thoughtful, intelligent young man, shaped by the values his father instilled in him. Yet the memory of that Christmas Eve flight remained tucked away in the back of their minds, a small detail that neither fully understood, but that both felt was important in its own quiet way. One summer, when Ethan was about 12, the two of them decided to revisit the airport where their Christmas Eve flight had begun. It was a simple trip, meant to relive old memories and enjoy a day together. They walked through the terminal, pointing out the gate where they had boarded, the cafe where they had shared a hot chocolate, and even the area near security where they had waited. For David, it was a nostalgic journey, bringing back memories of a simpler time when Ethan was small and the world felt magical. For Ethan, it was a chance to see the place from a new perspective, to notice details he had overlooked as a child. As they wandered through the terminal, Ethan's curiosity about the flight grew stronger. He asked questions about how planes were built, why some cabins were divided, and what secrets might lie behind certain walls or panels. David answered as best he could, but even he could not explain the unusual design he had noticed decades earlier. They laughed, talked, and explored, enjoying the day together. It was during this visit that Ethan began to realize that ordinary places sometimes held extraordinary stories. He started to understand that small details, like a wall on a plane, could carry mysteries that might only be revealed years later. Back at home, the two often talked about the flight. They looked at photographs David had taken that night, pointing out faces, seats, and even the small Christmas decorations scattered throughout the cabin. Each photo sparked memories and questions. Ethan, now growing into a young teenager, began to research airplanes, aviation history, and airport designs. He discovered that planes often had sections separated by walls for crew use, storage, or safety reasons. Yet something about the wall they had seen that night did not fit the usual explanations. It was subtle, almost hidden, but it had caught their attention for a reason they did not yet understand. Over time, the father and son developed a shared sense of wonder. They began to see the world differently, noticing small details in everyday life, appreciating hidden beauty, and valuing moments of quiet observation. David realized that the flight had left a lasting impression on both of them, not just because it was exciting, but because it had sparked curiosity and reflection. It had taught them to pay attention, to ask questions, and to treasure experiences that might otherwise seem ordinary. Even as life became more complicated with school, work, and responsibilities, the memory of that night remained a guiding light in their relationship. As Ethan grew older, he began to explore his own interests more deeply. He became fascinated by mysteries, history, and unsolved stories. David encouraged this curiosity, supporting his son's research and discussions. Together, they would discuss historical events, secret operations, and hidden truths. The Christmas Eve flight became a recurring topic, a case study of sorts in their conversations about observation and discovery. They laughed at their younger selves, marveling at how a simple flight could leave such a lasting impression. Yet, neither could have imagined that the truth behind that wall would one day resurface in a way that would astonish them both. Meanwhile, David continued his work life, always ensuring that Ethan felt secure and loved. He taught his son the importance of patience, observation, and critical thinking. These lessons, combined with Ethan's natural curiosity, laid the foundation for a young man who would one day uncover truths that had remained hidden for decades. The father and son shared a unique bond, strengthened not just by love, but by a shared appreciation for the small mysteries and subtle wonders of life. They learned that even ordinary moments, like a flight on Christmas Eve, could carry significance far beyond what was immediately visible. As the years went by, the memory of that flight faded slightly in day-to-day life, but it never disappeared. It lingered quietly, like a faint melody in the background, waiting for the right moment to resurface. David sometimes thought about it during quiet evenings, reflecting on how smoothly everything had gone, how happy Ethan had been, and how small details, like the mysterious wall, had gone unnoticed at the time. Ethan, now approaching adulthood, also carried the memory with him, often thinking about what might have been hidden behind that subtle division in the plane. Their shared curiosity became a gentle bond, connecting past experiences with future discoveries. By the time Ethan finished high school, he had grown into a thoughtful, observant, and determined young man. David watched with pride as his son pursued his interests, often involving history, research, and uncovering hidden truths. The lessons of patience, observation, and curiosity that David had instilled over the years were now evident in Ethan's personality. Yet the memory of that Christmas Eve flight remained a small, unresolved mystery, a puzzle that neither father nor son had been able to fully understand. It was a memory that promised answers, but only in its own time. And so the ordinary flight on that cold Christmas Eve, filled with joy, excitement, and the warmth of a father and son together, became something more than a simple memory. It became a story of curiosity, subtle observation, and the quiet anticipation of a truth that would one day emerge. The moments they shared, the questions they asked, and the bond they nurtured during those years would prepare them for the discovery that lay ahead, a revelation that would forever change their understanding of that seemingly ordinary flight. Years passed, and life continued to move forward for David and Ethan. Ethan had grown into a young man, bright, curious, and driven, with an appetite for discovery that reminded David of his own younger self. They often reflected on past experiences, remembering family moments and the Christmas Eve flight that had left such a strong mark on them both. Though the flight had seemed ordinary at the time, the memory of the subtle wall on the plane never left them. It remained like a quiet whisper in their minds, a detail that had seemed insignificant, but now seemed to hold deeper meaning. David occasionally wondered why he had remembered it so clearly, yet he never imagined that the truth would one day resurface in the most unexpected way. It all began with a renovation project at the old airport. The authorities had decided to update the terminal, replacing outdated structures and making room for modern facilities. During the renovation, workers uncovered something unusual behind one of the walls. There was a hidden compartment, almost perfectly concealed, that had remained untouched for decades. Inside, they found documents, photographs, and records that had been carefully stored, yet entirely forgotten. The discovery was treated with curiosity and caution, and soon news of the findings spread quietly among the officials involved in the project. The contents of the compartment revealed something that no one had anticipated, a secret operation tied to the flight David and Ethan had taken so many years ago. When David first heard about the discovery, he could hardly believe it. He remembered the flight in vivid detail, the smooth takeoff, Ethan's excitement, the quiet hum of the engines, and most importantly, the mysterious wall in the cabin. Suddenly, the memory made sense. The wall he had noticed as a small child's detail was part of something much larger, something hidden and secret. He immediately called Ethan, who had grown into a young adult with a sharp mind and an investigative spirit. "Ethan," David said, his voice a mixture of astonishment and disbelief, "you're not going to believe this. That flight we took on Christmas Eve, it wasn't just a normal flight." Ethan was intrigued. He had always been curious about the details of that flight, particularly the wall that had seemed unusual. Now, decades later, there was a chance to uncover the truth. He listened intently as his father recounted the story of the compartment discovered during the renovation and the hidden documents that linked the flight to a secret operation. The young man felt a surge of excitement and anticipation. All those years of unanswered questions were finally on the verge of being answered. "Dad," Ethan said, "we need to find out everything. We need to understand what that wall was for and why it was there." David and Ethan began their research carefully. They contacted historians, aviation experts, and even retired airport staff who might have remembered something about that flight or the aircraft. Slowly, piece by piece, the story began to emerge. The hidden wall in the plane had not been random. It was part of a security protocol, a section designed to separate certain passengers and materials from the rest of the cabin. Documents indicated that this compartment had been used to house sensitive items, carefully monitored during flights, and completely hidden from passengers. David and Ethan learned that their flight had coincided with an operation that was entirely classified at the time. The fact that they had been unaware of it made sense. The purpose was to keep it invisible, even to those on board. The more they learned, the more fascinated they became. The father and son spent hours poring over photographs, flight logs, and old blueprints. They discovered that the flight had been part of a larger initiative, one that involved monitoring certain movements and ensuring the safety of sensitive cargo during a period when security measures were not as transparent as they are today. Though there was no danger to the passengers, the secrecy of the operation had kept the details hidden from the public. David reflected on the night of the flight with a mix of amazement and nostalgia. What had seemed like an ordinary holiday journey was, in fact, a small part of a carefully orchestrated plan. Ethan, inspired by the unfolding story, began documenting everything meticulously. He made notes about the flight, the airport, and the hidden compartment, cross-referencing information from different sources. He realized that the Christmas Eve flight was more than a memory. It was a historical snapshot, a moment in time that had intersected with events far beyond their understanding at the time. David watched his son with pride, amazed at how Ethan's curiosity and dedication mirrored his own. They were uncovering a truth that had been hidden for decades, a story that connected their personal memory to a larger historical narrative. As they delved deeper, they discovered photographs showing the interior of the plane, including the very wall David had noticed as a child. There were small compartments, carefully secured, and notes indicating that certain passengers had been assigned to specific areas for monitoring purposes. The discovery validated David's memory of the wall, a detail he had thought was insignificant at the time. The realization that they had unknowingly witnessed a part of a secret operation filled them both with awe. It was as if the past had quietly been waiting for them to reconnect the pieces, to understand the significance of a flight that had once seemed ordinary. The father and son decided to visit the airport again, this time with the purpose of seeing where the hidden compartment had been discovered. Standing in the renovated terminal, they could hardly believe the transformation that had taken place over the decades. Workers showed them the area where the documents had been found, explaining how the compartment had been concealed within a wall that appeared ordinary to anyone passing by. David's mind went back to that night so many years ago, the excitement, the lights, the plane, and Ethan's small hand in his own. Now the mystery of the wall had been solved, revealing a hidden truth that tied their personal experience to a broader story. The discovery brought a mix of emotions. David felt awe at the complexity and secrecy of the operation, pride in having experienced such a unique moment in history, and nostalgia for the night that had been so special to him and Ethan. Ethan felt excitement, curiosity satisfied, and inspiration for the future. Together, they realized that life often hides extraordinary truths in ordinary moments, waiting for the right time to be revealed. The wall that had once seemed mysterious now stood as a symbol of hidden histories, the quiet threads that connect personal memories to larger events. Over the next few months, David and Ethan continued to explore the story. They spoke with historians, former airport staff, and even aviation enthusiasts who helped them piece together the broader context of the operation. They learned that secrecy had been a priority during that era, and flights like theirs were carefully monitored to protect sensitive information. Despite the complexity, there was no danger to the passengers, and the operation had been conducted smoothly and efficiently. The father and son marveled at the precision and care involved, gaining a new appreciation for the people who worked behind the scenes to ensure safety and confidentiality. The story of the Christmas Eve flight, the hidden wall, and the compartment became a source of inspiration for both David and Ethan. It taught them lessons about observation, patience, and the importance of remembering small details. They realized that memories, no matter how ordinary they seem at the time, can carry significance that only becomes clear years later. David often reflected on the moment he had noticed the wall as they took their seats on the plane, understanding that even minor observations can become crucial pieces of a much larger puzzle. Ethan, motivated by the experience, began writing a detailed account of their journey. He wanted to share the story of the flight, the hidden compartment, and the revelation with others. His writing emphasized the bond between father and son, the wonder of discovery, and the importance of curiosity. The story was not just about secrecy or hidden operations. It was about life, memory, and the unexpected ways in which ordinary moments can intersect with history. David supported his son fully, helping with details, providing guidance, and sharing his own recollections. Together, they transformed a childhood memory into a meaningful narrative that bridged generations. Looking back, David could see how far they had come. The Christmas Eve flight, once a simple holiday journey, had become a defining moment in their lives. It had sparked curiosity, strengthened the father-son bond, and led to the discovery of a hidden truth that connected them to history in ways they could never have imagined. Ethan's growth, his inquisitive nature, and his dedication to uncovering the story mirrored David's own values and lessons. The flight, the wall, and the hidden compartment had become more than memories. They had become symbols of exploration, learning, and the power of paying attention to the world around them. Finally, as they reflected on everything they had discovered, both David and Ethan felt a sense of completion and wonder. The mystery that had begun decades ago had been solved, but it also left them with a deeper understanding of life's complexities. Ordinary moments, small details, and quiet observations could carry extraordinary significance. Their journey had taught them to look beyond the surface, to question, to explore, and to treasure the moments that at first seemed insignificant. The Christmas Eve flight would always remain a part of their personal history, now enriched by the hidden truths that had finally come to light. And so the father and son sat together one evening, looking at photographs of the flight, the cabin, and the wall that had started it all. They laughed at memories, marveled at discoveries, and shared a quiet satisfaction in knowing that their curiosity and patience had uncovered something remarkable. What had begun as a simple holiday trip had transformed into a story of hidden history, family bonds, and the remarkable connections between past and present. David and Ethan realized that the truth sometimes waits patiently, ready to reveal itself when the time is right, and that life, full of ordinary moments, often holds extraordinary surprises. After the revelation of the hidden compartment and the secret behind the wall on there. Christmas Eve flight, David and Ethan felt a mixture of awe, curiosity, and gratitude. The discovery had not only answered questions they had carried for decades, but had also changed the way they viewed life. The flight that had once seemed like a simple holiday journey was now a story of mystery, discovery, and unexpected connections. The father and son spent hours reflecting on the events, piecing together memories with the new knowledge they had uncovered. Every detail, the plane, the lights, the hum of the engines, and Ethan's wide-eyed excitement, took on new significance. It was as if the ordinary moments of that night had been quietly preparing them for a revelation far greater than they could have imagined. Ethan, now an adult, had a renewed sense of purpose. The story of their flight had inspired him to explore other hidden histories, secrets, and untold stories. He realized that curiosity and patience were powerful tools, allowing him to uncover truths that might otherwise remain buried. He began documenting stories, conducting research, and speaking to people who had experienced events that history had overlooked. The lessons he had learned from that Christmas Eve flight, the importance of observation, questioning, and persistence, guided his work. David watched with pride as his son pursued his interests with dedication, knowing that the journey they had shared had left an indelible mark on him. For David, the experience was equally transformative. He had always known that memories could be powerful, but the revelation about the wall and the compartment taught him that ordinary moments often hide extraordinary truths. He thought about the night of the flight, how he had carefully watched over Ethan, ensuring his comfort and happiness, and how a small, unnoticed detail had become a key to a decades-old mystery. The realization filled him with a deep sense of wonder and appreciation. Life, he realized, was full of unseen connections, waiting for the right time to reveal themselves. This understanding gave him a renewed perspective on family, experiences, and the value of paying attention to the world around him. Together, David and Ethan decided to share their story with others. They felt that the flight, the hidden wall, and the discovery of the compartment were not just personal memories. They were lessons in curiosity, observation, and the unexpected ways in which ordinary events can intersect with history. They spoke at schools, local historical societies, and community events, emphasizing the importance of looking closely at details, asking questions, and valuing experiences that might seem small or insignificant. Their story captivated audiences, inspiring people to appreciate the hidden layers of everyday life and to recognize that even the most ordinary moments can hold extraordinary significance. The father and son also took the time to visit the airport where the discovery had been made. Standing in the renovated terminal, they reflected on how much had changed over the years. The once bustling terminal was now modern and efficient, yet it still held traces of the past. They walked through the area where the hidden compartment had been found, imagining the passengers on their flight, the careful monitoring of the operation, and the secret history that had remained invisible for decades. It was a humbling experience, reminding them that history is often hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who are curious enough to uncover it. As they explored further, David and Ethan realized how much their lives had been shaped by that single flight. The experience had strengthened their bond, teaching them to rely on each other, to ask questions, and to embrace curiosity. It had also taught them the importance of patience, as some truths take years to emerge. The discovery of the hidden compartment was more than a historical revelation. It was a personal journey that had deepened their relationship and inspired a new way of looking at the world. For both father and son, it became a story they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Ethan's work in documenting hidden histories grew beyond the story of their flight. He began researching other untold stories, learning about overlooked events, forgotten places, and unnoticed details that shaped history. He realized that the world is filled with mysteries waiting to be discovered, and that even the smallest observations can lead to meaningful insights. David supported him throughout, offering guidance, encouragement, and wisdom from his own experiences. Together, they cultivated a shared passion for discovery, one that went beyond personal curiosity and reached into the broader context of human history and understanding. The revelation of the flight's secret also brought a new appreciation for the importance of memory and storytelling. David and Ethan understood that memories are not just personal experiences, they are connections to history, culture, and the shared human experience. By remembering and sharing their story, they honored both the ordinary and extraordinary aspects of life. They realized that every moment, no matter how small, can hold significance that may only become clear years later. This understanding encouraged them to cherish everyday experiences, to notice details, and to approach life with curiosity and openness. Family gatherings, holidays, and everyday routines took on new meaning after the discovery. David and Ethan shared their story with relatives, friends, and colleagues, sparking conversations about memory, history, and the hidden stories that surround everyone. They encouraged those around them to look more closely at the world, to value small observations, and to embrace curiosity in their own lives. The flight, once a private memory, became a shared lesson, inspiring others to recognize the extraordinary potential in ordinary experiences. The story became a symbol of how history and personal memory can intersect, creating a deeper understanding of life's hidden layers. Reflecting on the journey, David realized how much he had grown as a father and as a person. He had taught Ethan the importance of curiosity, patience, and careful observation, and in turn, Ethan had taught him to see the world through fresh eyes. Together, they had uncovered a hidden truth that changed the way they viewed their own experiences and the world around them. The discovery reinforced the idea that life is full of hidden connections, and that every moment, no matter how seemingly ordinary, has the potential to reveal something extraordinary. Ethan, inspired by the story, decided to write a book about their experience. He wanted to capture the journey of discovery, the father-son bond, and the lessons learned from the flight and the hidden wall. The book emphasized the importance of observation, curiosity, and patience, and it highlighted how ordinary experiences can connect to larger historical events. David assisted Ethan in recalling details, sharing memories, and ensuring that the story remained authentic and engaging. Their collaborative effort resulted in a narrative that was not only compelling but also meaningful, offering readers both an intriguing mystery and a heartfelt lesson about life and family. As the book took shape, the father and son reflected on the impact of their journey. They realized that the story of their Christmas Eve flight was not just about a hidden wall or a secret compartment. It was about connection, discovery, and growth. The experience had strengthened their relationship, inspired Ethan's future, and reminded them both of the value of paying attention to life's details. They had learned that curiosity and patience are powerful tools, capable of revealing truths that might otherwise remain hidden. The flight, once an ordinary event, had become a symbol of the extraordinary potential in everyday experiences. Finally, as the years continued to pass, David and Ethan continued to cherish their shared memories. The story of the Christmas Eve flight, the hidden wall, and the secret compartment became a cornerstone of their lives, a reminder of the importance of curiosity, family, and the pursuit of truth. They continued to explore, learn, and document hidden histories, inspired by the lessons of that night. Their bond, strengthened through decades of shared experiences, grew even deeper, rooted in love, trust, and the joy of discovery. Looking back, David often thought about the small details that had seemed insignificant at the time. The glow of the city lights, Ethan's laughter, the hum of the plane, and the wall that had initially seemed mysterious. Each detail had played a part in a larger story, waiting patiently for the right moment to reveal its significance. For Ethan, the experience reinforced the value of curiosity, persistence, and observation, teaching him that even the simplest experiences can connect to broader truths and meaningful discoveries. In the end, the father and son understood that life is full of hidden stories and unexpected truths. The Christmas Eve flight had taught them to notice, question, and explore, reminding them that ordinary moments can carry extraordinary significance. It had strengthened their bond, inspired a lifelong pursuit of knowledge, and left them with a story that would continue to resonate for generations. The hidden wall, once a small mystery, had become a powerful symbol of curiosity, discovery, and the enduring connection between father and son. And so, the journey that began with a simple flight on a snowy Christmas Eve ended not with a conclusion, but with a legacy. A legacy of curiosity, observation, and shared discovery that would continue to inspire both David and Ethan, and everyone who heard their story. What had started as a quiet holiday trip had transformed into a tale of wonder, revelation, and lifelong learning. A reminder that even in ordinary moments, extraordinary truths can be waiting to be uncovered.